Hey there, welcome back to another video. This time around, it is my review of the 1988 horror remake, The Blob. Scream now while there's still room to breathe. Now, to me personally, this film is fucking awesome. It's not just one of the best remakes, it's honestly one of the best horror films. At least for me personally. This is in my top 10. It's a film that I find to be immensely entertaining. It's a film that I've always been a big fan of since the first time that I saw it on DVD when I rented the DVD from the local library, uh, along with John Carpenter's The Fog, which is another one of my favorites. And it's a film that honestly I could watch again and again and never get tired of it because I just love it that much. I love the plot, I love the direction, I love the performances by the cast, I love the visual and practical effects. Uh, it's just a absolutely terrific film. And to me, it's honestly one of the best popcorn horror films that you will ever see. And I've seen this in person because I saw the film in the theater in 35 millimeter a couple years ago at a local theater in Portland, Oregon called the Hollywood Theater. And it was a packed house and people were just going crazy over this movie. People were reacting to all of the inventive, gory kills. They were laughing at the lines of dialogue. They were cheering at certain scenes. When the film was over, they were giving it a round of an applause. So, yeah, like this is a film that to me personally, it might not be as technically skilled as some of the other horror films from the 80s or some of the other horror remakes. It might not be as, let's just say, sophisticated when it comes to some of the themes and the subtext and the storytelling as something like David Cronenberg's The Fly or even John Carpenter's The Thing or some other horror films from this decade. But it more than makes up for that by just being so much fun to watch. And it is genuinely top of the line when it comes to certain elements. When it comes to the practical effects, this film, to me, is representative of some of the best in the industry at the time. Like, you're getting peak practical effects when it comes to the Blob remake. And yeah, it's a movie that I just genuinely love. I mean, I used to have the film's poster on my wall for many, many years until it finally started to fall apart and had to take it off the wall and replace it with something else. And I even have the press kit for this movie. I I have the film on Laserdisc. I have the film on VHS. I I I have the film now in 4K with the Blu-ray, and it's just genuinely one of those films that I just can't get enough of. And I even did a tribute to the film. I made a music video called Flesh Harvest that actually got a lot of views on YouTube before I had to take it down due to copyright. And apparently, Chuck Russell himself, the director of The Blob, he actually saw that video and liked it and thought it was pretty cool. So there's that. Yeah, there's a lot of reasons why I love this film and why I honestly think it's more fun than a bowl of Jello. And forgive me if I might ramble or this might be a long one, because this is one of my personal favorites. So I definitely want to uh, say what I want to say. Now, the film is directed by Chuck Russell, and I think Chuck Russell did an absolutely stupendous, just amazing job directing this film. He's done a lot of good work in general. Uh, Dream Warriors, The Mask, and so on. But this is my personal favorite of his. You could tell that he just loved the assignment. He loved the concept, and he really just had a blast. And as a result, the film is such a genuine blast to watch because the director is just having so much fun with uh with the project. I think he was a fan of the original Blob, so I think that's a big reason why he wanted to do this. And he didn't just make the original. He had some scenes that were definitely homages to the original, like some of the stuff with the old man, the hermit when he finds the blob, or the movie theater sequence, but he made them his own. And when it comes to the film in general, like this is just a great looking movie. And it starts from the opening of the film with this really unique, cool shot that's from the perspective of in the sky. So I think he's like using a camera that's just flying through the sky, and then it goes down, and it's the camera starts floating through this small town, Arborville, and it's empty. It's like a ghost town, but it then transitions and pans over to this high school football game, and then it's revealed that it's not a ghost town. Everyone's just at the local high school football game. And I just thought the way that Chuck Russell shot that entire opening sequence was tremendous. I thought it was genuinely something that I thought was very skilled in terms of how he pulled that off. And he just continues that throughout the film. And it's not just the special effects sequences, it's not just the scenes that involve the blob, but I mean, those sequences are genuinely impressive as well, especially when it comes to how he's able to really showcase the practical effects and to provide the most visceral impact when it comes to the kills, when it comes to the various different imaginative gory deaths, and also just the various different sequences that just showcase the blob moving around or going from place to place, and how he was able to shoot stop motion and green screen work versus sequences that were dealing with the blob on set and were shot live, and it was just a seamless transition for the most part, despite just how potential complicated things could be when it comes to the various different types of effect shots. And it's not only a film that shines when it comes to the direction involving effects, it also shines when it comes to the direction involving the characters and just little sequences that feature like Meg and Brian just hanging out at the local diner and bonding and getting to know one another, or uh, the scenes involving Brian with his mechanic, or the stuff with the old hermit when the blob first arrives to Earth, and stuff involving the finale, or sequences with the preacher, or just a lot of different things that really make this film stand out. The movie theater sequence, like that whole entire sequence was just really inspired in terms of how it was shot, creating this false sense of security with the two kids that are watching this slasher movie. the way that the direction was handled when it comes to the showing the film that they're watching, and then cutting back to the audience that's watching it, the heckler, or not really the heckler, but the guy in the audience who won't shut up, and then just the timing of everything. And that's another thing that I thought was just really tremendous about this film, when it comes to the direction, is just how well timed things are, and how well Chuck Russell blocked the various different sequences, and how he shot scenes that involved action, like not just the Blob eating people or killing people in various different ways, but like the motorcycle chase scene, or the sequence at the end when Brian and Meg are in the sewer and they use the bazooka and blow up the manhole, like stuff like that. It's just a really well put together and genuinely well shot film in pretty much every capacity. And I think Chuck Russell deserves a ton of credit for this film, if not more credit than he gets, because I know a lot of people love this movie in the horror community and praise it and so on and so forth. But honestly, I think his direction in this is peak Chuck Russell. Like, this is him at his best. And it's not just because I'm a huge fan of the film. Like, this is just a really good looking movie. And Chuck also did a equally as great job co-writing the film along with Frank Darabont. This is one of my favorite horror screenplays. And the reason for that is honestly a bunch of reasons. But for one, I think it's a really great remake script, because it takes a page from The Fly and The Thing, where it's not trying to be the same thing as the original. It has different characters with different names, and for the most part, different motivations and different character arcs. It takes place in a different location, and it deals with a blob, but this time around, it's not a blob from outer space. It's a blob that's a germ warfare test that they fucked up. And I love that about this script. It just takes what the Blob did and twists and changes things around to make it more unique. And at the same time, I think it improves upon it because it makes it more interesting. It's now not just another sci-fi horror film. Now it's also a conspiracy a movie with the government who created some kind of experiment, and then it got unleashed, and now you have the government being involved, and the military, and they're treating it like it's some kind of virus, and so now it's almost sort of a contagion movie. And there's just a lot of elements of this script that really work tremendously well. And the fact that it's the Blob, uh but better, is one of them. I think the characters are immensely important to the film, and I feel that both writers just do such a great job fleshing out these characters when it comes to the main players, specifically Megan and Brian. Uh, but there's also a lot of stuff that happens with just the various supporting characters, and how it fakes you out with Paull, for instance, where you think Paull is going to be the lead, but then he gets eaten by the Blob, and then it's this unlikely lead in Brian Flagg, where you saw him early on his bike, but you didn't necessarily think that he was the guy who was going to be the main lead for the film, because it focuses more on Paull and his friend Scott. And I love the dynamic between Paull and Scott. Uh, and I love how Scott Jeske, he's a total jerk, but the way that he's written, ribbed or regular, like the whole stuff with him and Paull, like it's written in a way that's fun despite how much of a jerk this guy is. I mean, this guy's like essentially date raping the women. That's really what he's doing. He's with his cherry coolers, his famous cherry coolers. He's pulling a Bill Cosby and he's taking advantage of these women. But just the way that the script is handled, it doesn't lose its sense of fun or entertainment value because it's in on it. Like the script is very aware that Scott Jeske is a total jerk, and he ultimately gets his comeuppance in the end anyway. But he's also a jerk in a way that's still kind of funny and entertaining because of the dynamic between him and Paull, or like the whole drugstore sequence. Like that is a genuinely hilarious sequence, and it pays off brilliantly with the whole sequence with Paull meeting Meg's dad, and he's all like ribbed. Like there's just a great sense of humor in this script, and it carries over with a brilliant bit of satire when it comes to the slasher film that the two kids sneak into the theater to go see later on in the movie. And you could just tell that the two writers, they just were having an absolute ball, and it really does benefit the film in so many different ways. And the Blob itself, like when you get to the Blob, and when the Blob starts eating people and it starts its killing spree, it is intense. It's uh unbelievable in terms of just how imaginative and incredibly gory the deaths are. I mean, Paul's death is still one of the most horrific things I think I've ever seen in any horror film. Like the image of him, like essentially being suffocated by the blob, enveloped by it, with his pale face and like his white eyes, and he's just screaming bloody murder, and then his arm falls off in Meg's hands, and then she's screaming her head off. Like that is something that is going to stick with me forever. And it's really impressive that this script has moments like that of just pure visceral horror, but then still has these fun moments like the movie theater sequence where the guy who's in the audience and he won't shut up gets his comeuppance when the blob eats him, and other little bits here and there with certain characters, or even little subplots that are sweet, like the stuff with the sheriff and the gal that uh, runs the diner. And it makes it tragic when both of them meet their demise because they seem like they could be a sweet couple. And even the stuff involving the preacher and his transition and his ultimate transformation after he gets burned by fire, and of course Brian Flagg and how he evolves from this guy who's considered to be this troublemaker, and he's the cause of all the problems in this small town. And when people start dying, they first start blaming him, and then he ultimately becomes a hero in the end. And Meg Penny, who's the cheerleader, who seems like, oh, she couldn't do anything, she's not going to be much of a threat to the blob or anyone. Like she, she's more likely to break a nail than kick any ass. And then as the film goes on further, like she gets stronger and stronger, and then she ends it with like a machine gun, essentially telling the blob to come at her. And it's also a very satisfying and very rewarding transition for her character. And she's smart. You see that early on, even before she starts to show her badass tendencies. Her parents are trying to drug her because they don't believe what she is saying in terms of the blob and how it ate Paull, and she's like, nah, I'm not gonna take these pills. I'm not gonna just sleep it off. Like, no, I'm messed up. Like, this is traumatizing. I'm not going to just sleep it off. I need to figure out what the hell is going on, and I need to talk to somebody, and we need to figure out how to stop this thing. And I like that you do have elements from the original as well in terms of how the blob, it's affected by cold, but the way that the screenplay handles that is different. It's not like they pack it up and take it to the North Pole. Like, no, like they freeze it with a snowmaking machine. And it leads to a really rousing, thrilling climax. And it's just such a amazing script. I love this screenplay, and you get what you want, and then some when it comes to the kills. So creative, like not just the stuff with Paull, but you have the Scott Jeske death where he's trying to cop a feel on this girl, and then she just essentially implodes in front of his eyes, and the blob just comes right out and just devours his ass. You've got the famous sink death, the one where the guy's trying to figure out what's going on with this clogged drain, and the blob pops out and grabs him by the face, and then drags him head first into the drain, and you see the pipes burst and blood spray out. You've got the movie theater sequence where there's a ton of different imaginative deaths where people are melting and stuck to the floor, or the guy who's stuck on the ceiling. Um, you've got the stuff that happens in the finale when the blob is unleashed and it's eating all the military people and the scientists, and grabs one of the cops and bends him backwards through a bookcase. Like, there's so much when it comes to the kills that this film delivers. Like, if you want like slasher movie level imaginative kills, you get that with this screenplay. And it helps, like Chuck Russell, he worked on Dream Warriors, and so he brings that skill to this screenplay. Takes the imagination of a Nightmare on Elm Street film and then applies it to the Blob, and it actually fits very well. And I just love how everything is so paced perfectly, in my opinion, when it comes to how you have the lull in the beginning, establishing the characters. Maybe there's not a ton of depth for all of the characters, but there's enough there that you know who they are, you know what they stand for, you know what their place is in the story, and with a lot of the characters, they're still given good lines of dialogue, or they're given moments that allow them to endear themselves with the audience. So then when the blob really starts to be unleashed and it starts eating people, including a kid, which is also something I want to give the writers a lot of credit for, because they had the balls to go there. Like, that makes the blob even more fearsome because of the fact that it doesn't hold back. It's like, I'm hungry. I'm a voracious germ warfare test. I don't care. I don't have any qualms whatsoever in terms of eating a kid, eating a pet, eating whoever. Like, it's one of those things where nothing is safe, and that just makes it even more intense. And yeah, despite all that, you just still have great lines of dialogue. I think you pissed it off. And even just little exchanges between characters. Like, I love the interaction between Meg and Brian at the diner when Meg tells Brian he's full of shit, and then he remarks afterwards, sarcastically, is like, "Is that your first time?" That kind of interaction. I just love that. It's like, so how was that for you? Like, it just makes these characters all the more fun to watch, and just overall film so much more entertaining. And even the sequel bait stuff I didn't mind, because I wanted to see more of it. I want to see more of the blob in these characters. I want to see more of Meg and Brian. Um, to me, the real Meg and Brian are in this movie, not in Family Guy. fuck that, fuck those characters. Like the real Meg and Brian for me are Meg Penny and Brian Flagg from the Blob. But yeah, I love this script. It's one of my personal favorites, and it's a prime example of how you make a remake the right way. You don't spend too much of the screenplay trying to be a homage to the original. You have elements of the original and maybe a couple homages here and there, but you put most of your effort and most of the time into making a standalone story with its own characters and with their own arcs, and you adapt it to the modern age, at least the modern age of the time when it comes to the screenplay. So you're not living in the past, and it's just a great example of how you make a great remake and just a great film in general. And the cast is just amazing. This cast is awesome. I think this cast is incredibly underrated. I mean, Kevin Dillon, I don't think he's ever been better than he was in this as Brian Flagg. He was charismatic, he was charming, he was a badass when he needed to be, and he did a good job playing a honestly kind of a tough role because the guy he is a bit of a troublemaker, but he was able to bring a certain aspect of that character out that still made you like him, despite the fact that he is a bit of a troublemaker. You get that vibe initially early on, but you feel like in some ways he's a bit justified because he's just a target by people in this small town, and you see his good side. And when he shows his good side when he's trying to help the old man, uh, it comes across as genuine. It doesn't come across like it's forced. And when it comes to the scenes between him and Meg, and when they start to bond and when they start to fall for one another, like it's genuinely sweet and charming because Kevin Dillon just really did a great job playing this character, and his line delivery was great. And it's honestly one of my favorite performances when it comes to a male actor in a horror film. And I feel the same way about Shawnee Smith as Meg. Like she is honestly one of my favorite female characters in not just a horror film, but in any film in general. Like she's not only drop dead gorgeous, but she's also resourceful, she's smart, she can hold her own, she's not dead weight. And she gets a kick ass too. I mean, she grabs that gun and starts firing at the blob at the end. And she was equally as believable when it comes to every aspect of her character. I think it's a very underrated performance by Shawnee Smith. And apparently, like I wasn't the only one because James Wan, he he liked this film. And the reason why she was even cast in Saw was because he was such a big fan of her in this movie, in the Blob remake. And you could see why. Like it's a really great performance by Shawnee Smith. Um, and Donovan Leitch, he was also really good in his little small role that he had. He had some chemistry with Shawnee Smith as well, and he played a rather likable character. And he had charisma and he had charm, and he could have been the lead. He really could have been the lead. He could have carried the film too, but uh, it would have been a more traditional thing, would have been closer to what the original was, but it still would have worked because Donovan Leitch did such a good job playing Paull. And the rest of the supporting cast is also equally as good. Like Jeffrey DeMunn as Sheriff Herb, Candy Clark as Fran. It's honestly one of my favorite performances of hers. Just such a kind, just well-meaning, lovable character, and it just makes her death all the more horrific in that phone booth where she sees her Herb float by her inside the blob, his corpse just floating by her, and then she just has realized like, oh no, I'm done, and then the phone booth collapses and she just gets engulfed. Joe Seneca was also good as the mysterious Doctor Meadows. Del Close was effective as the Reverend Meeker, especially when it comes to playing two sides of this character. Played the guy who's just the Reverend in the small town. Everybody loves him. He loves everybody, knows everybody, seems like a really nice guy. And then when he gets burned and he gets corrupted by the evil of the blob, and then he's a manic preacher, he pulled that off as well. Um, Even people like Sharon Spellman, who plays Penny's mom, um, Art LaFleur, who plays Penny's dad, Ricky Paull Goldin, who plays Scott Jeske, Paul McCrane from RoboCop, who plays Briggs. Um, Bill Moseley, who plays one of the soldiers in the sewer. Erica Leniak, who plays Vicky, the girl that Scott Jeske is trying to take advantage of. Jack Nance, who you might recognize from Eraserhead and other David Lynch films, who plays the Doctor, and he does a good job in that. Robert Axelrod is a character named Jennings. Michael Kenworthy, who plays Kevin Penny. Douglas Emerson, who plays Eddie, his friend. Um, yeah, the performances are just great all across the board, and it just makes this film reach an even higher level overall because the performances are just so strong. And it's equally as good when it comes to the cinematography. Like, Mark Irwin is a magnificent cinematographer, and his work here is no exception. Like, this is a really just grand looking film, despite budget that's like, it's 10 million. It was a $10 million budget. It's not like it cost $50 million or anything, but it looks like it cost twice that much, maybe even three times as much, because of just how well it's shot, and just how great it looks visually, especially the movie theater sequence. Just the way that it handled all the strobing lights and everything, and still made everything still relatively easy to see what's going on, and how it balanced the effects in that scene, and just how it just made for just a really immersive, incredible sequence. And there's just a lot of moments like that throughout the film, cinematography wise, where it really shines, and it does a great job bringing this small town to life, and great job shooting like difficult places to shoot in, like the sewers, and just a really a great film when it comes to just the way that it looks, and in large part it's because of the combined efforts of Mark Irwin and the director Chuck Russell. And the editing by Todd Furman and Terry Stokes is also terrific. The two of them work together very well, and just really added and elevated a lot of different elements of this movie, especially when it comes to the various different blob sequences, in terms of really making the effects pop a little bit more, or the gore scenes have a little bit more punch to them. And I think the music by Michael Hoeing is also pretty good. I would say, out of all of the elements of this movie, the score at times is one of the few things that I don't think is necessarily on the same level. That being said, I still think it's a good fit for the film. I still think it's a pretty solid score overall, especially when it comes to the attack sequences or the various different chase scenes, or the piece that plays during the opening credits is very mysterious and really does a great job setting the tone for the film. Um, but there are some moments and some bits of the score that I felt sounded a bit cheap and a bit Casio, and I think it was mostly synthesizers and electronic when it comes to the score, not a lot of orchestral work. And so that's kind of why I would say I'm not as impressed with the score overall as I am with other aspects of the film, but it's still a score that works. It's not a score that's awful or particularly bad, but man, I just wish what Jerry Goldsmith could have done with the Blob remake, or somebody of that ilk, or maybe even someone like Christopher Young. But Michael Hoying still did a good job, and the songs that they used for the film, specifically the song at the end credits, "Brave New Love" by Alien, like those songs are great. Like "Brave New Love" is one of my favorite hair metal songs. Like that song is epic. Like that was one of the. This was honestly one of the first films I remember watching the end credits all the way through because I love that song so much. Um, but yeah, great, a soundtrack, solid score, just unbelievably amazing practical and makeup effects by a very talented crew. Um, Including not it wasn't Kevin Yeager, it was Tony Gardner, including Tony Gardner, who went on to do effects for Darkman and various other things. He did a lot of the makeup effects when it comes to the various different people that are getting eaten by the blob. And I was it Hoyt Yeatman? I think it might have been Hoyt Yeatman. There was a bunch of people that were involved when it comes to the blob crew, and just work together in just incredible ways to just create the best looking blob that has ever been put on the screen, with a mix of stop motion and a mix of different people doing puppet work, with a blob puppet, where they would take a trash bag and they would create a puppet of the blob, essentially, that they would, puppet around with servos and, animatronics and stuff. And they would have people actually under this trash bag or this tarp. And so you'd have people like sweating their balls off, playing the blob in certain scenes. And of course, they worked with miniatures as well. And it just all added together to just a really uh, uh, terrific and just amazing, awe-inspiring uh, amount of practical and visual effects. And the film just has some of the best pacing you could ever possibly ask for out of a film of this caliber. It's 95 minutes, but it feels like it's half that time because it's just so well paced. The characters are so strong. You really bond with them and get to know them and like them early on. There's none of this, oh, I don't know. I don't know about this guy. I don't know about this gal. I don't know where this is going. And there's a great balance of blob attacks versus plot, and just how it reveals everything with the whole conspiracy angle is just handled so well. And you even have car chases and motorcycle chases that are interspersed in between, and a very explosive, very crowd pleasing finale. And it's just one of those films that, like, after it's over, you're like, I want to watch that again. You're like, what a rush. Like, that was actually a line in the film. It is a rush. So it's a rush of uh, bloody, inventive, creative, gory horror, and just genuine entertainment. And it's a damn shame it did so poorly in the box office, but it eventually got its due. And I cannot recommend it enough if you haven't seen it already. But anyway, that's my thoughts on the Blob remake. And as always, thanks for watching, and I'll see you later. See ya. Brave new love. She gives it up like it's never been done. Brave new love. And in the dark, she's as tough as they come.